new teams, but even teams that have been together for a long time can really struggle with healthy conflict. And that has such a profound impact on the team's performance.
There's two different kinds of values. One is core values, which don't change. We're going to do this all day, every day. Everything we do is going to be through that filter. But then there's operational values that do change.
To the journey and understanding how you get from here to here, there's the mission, there's the vision, and there's the core values that all help align a team in it being able to engage in healthy conflict.
Jesus gives the parable of the guy that built his house on the sand, and then he said it's great until the storm comes, and then it all goes to, well, that's a picture of values. If you build your house on values that go all the way down, they go deep, they're force ranked, because if you don't have those right, maybe temporarily you'll be okay, but in the long run, it's going to collapse.
Tom?
Hey, Andrew, what's going on?
I'm excited for this episode. This one's a little more specific, so we'll see how deep the conversation goes. It's a very niche one, but I think it's super important.
Okay.
So what I want to talk about today is inside the team dynamic. And I'm pulling mainly from Stephen Covey's kind of like the pyramid of I think this is Patrick Lencioni's. Yeah. One of them is the five dysfunctions
of a team.
One of them is really the inability to engage in healthy conflict.
Okay.
I want to talk about that because I do feel like, specifically with new teams, but even teams that have been together for a long time can really struggle with healthy conflict.
Yeah.
And that has such a profound impact on the team's performance. You make better decisions because there's groupthink. You're not willing to get into the weeds because you're scared of potentially offending, or there's politics in the room, and so you're navigating all of that rather than being able to engage passionately on the thing at hand, disagree, but then hopefully reach a meaningful decision because you did engage in that. So I think I would love to explore kind of both sides, I guess, kind of from what you've seen. You've experienced a lot of teams, so you've probably seen teams that have not engaged in healthy conflict very well.
Yeah.
What is that like? How does that hurt them? And then as we tailor our conversation to the second half, how can teams grow?
Improve that.
Yeah. Because even for me, I want to create teams that have the capability to do that really well. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Yeah, and I'd love to dig into that. As you know, that's sort of my foundation for what I do in terms of executive coaching and teams. And all of those five dysfunctions, they all are interconnected, and they're not necessarily linear. He's laid out, but it's not like, well, this is this one, and you can't go to the next one till you get that.
Right.
But in terms of, it does have a hierarchy of just sort of practically how do things work in terms of that. So just kind of by way of definition at the very beginning, he uses the terminology of dysfunction.
Yeah.
5 dysfunctions of a team.
Yeah.
And dysfunction, it'd be good to just define that a little bit in that context, because dysfunction basically is it's not, one of the analogies I use about a healthy team, a healthy team is not one without wounds, it's one with wounds are not healed, using a body.
Oh,
so
interesting.
I could look at my hand and it looks pretty good, but you see a little cut on it.
Right.
And you might, if you're a doctor, you might ask, how long has that cut been there? Well, it's, as far as I know, like 5 years.
Oh.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. Something's wrong.
Overall, I seem very healthy, But one of the signs of dishealth or unhealth or unhealthy is things don't heal. So in a team, you may have conflicts, you may have things that are really difficult, and really maybe you blew it by being too aggressive or whatever. The healthy team is able to heal.
Yeah.
So dysfunction doesn't mean the lack of conflict or the lack of what it means is the lack of dealing with it.
Oh yeah,
That's
good.
the dysfunction.
Yeah.
So when you think in those terms, the big picture is a healthy is sort of the adjective to describe a good team. And so what does healthy mean? Well, it means a lot of things. There's preventative health things that you can do. There are, restorative things you can do. Then there's diagnostic things you can do right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
You can say, whoa, I can see what's going on here. We need to adjust it. Or sometimes you're done with whatever you're doing and there's a residue of unhealed or undealt with stuff. So that's kind of the big picture. So let's zero in for a second on the one that you're talking about, which is in the hierarchy, it follows vulnerability, trust.
Yes. Yeah.
So and that is a key thing to health. And one of the terms that Lencioni uses in that is vulnerability, trust.
Yeah, both.
So both
words.
The
yes.
one modifies the other.
Yeah.
Because so it's not just trust. So one of the things we've done also is Stephen Covey's speed of trust and using the grid and different types of trust and so on. But vulnerability trust means I can express myself without fear of retribution or fear of people, getting on me. There is a trust. There's a safety in saying and thinking out loud.
Yeah.
So in the vulnerability part comes from practice. You try it out. It's sort of like, a wounded dog. If you've ever seen a dog in a dog pound or something, and you're trying to get a little closer, and you have a certain distance that's safe, and then you go a little bit further, and but you might get bit,
Sure.
But you keep in mind the goal is, using that analogy, is to feed the dog. But often, because of woundedness and because of our past experience, is one of the hardest things to get over. Because if someone could really express what they're thinking in this context, where even you're saying it'd be really important for us to be able to say what we're thinking.
Yeah.
And it's important. You hit on one of the pieces earlier, but it's important. Both for the individual's life and how they feel in the context of working, but it's also functionally important to the phrase about the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
Well, that's not necessary. That doesn't mean just a room full of people is better than no people in the room.
Right.
It's how do they interact, and when a team is interacting and the timing is right and people forgive each other and they love each other, and love is an interesting word.
Yeah.
When it comes to the kind of workplace.
Totally.
There's some sort of secular theories that go on the basis of no, that's not appropriate in a workplace, which I say is crazy. You don't need love if you just have machines. AI will not know how to love.
Right.
It know the concept and it can plug in the characteristics, but it's not human. So what we long for and what we're made for is love. We want, and what does love mean? One of the characteristics of love, being loving and being loved, is that transparency, is that vulnerability. You know, I've got this feeling, and I'm really scared, and I don't know what to do. Well, don't bring it to the office, you know, and they have, that's a common sort of, it's a tension.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to spend all your time in the workplace. You're not a hospital. You know, you still have performance. You have to accomplish things. You have tasks. You have outcomes that you're measured by. All of those things. But having a healthy environment is built on that vulnerability, trust. Now back to the bridge then to healthy conflict. If you don't have that vulnerability trust, you generally won't have healthy conflict. You'll have conflict and have all kinds of it. Some of it is very outward and, you know, histrionic, like, yeah, well, you did, and yes, up, but the more dangerous type, because that type of conflict, I wouldn't recommend doing that just for the heck of it, but it's natural.
Sure, yeah.
That kind of conflict is only a problem when there's no healing, when there's no follow-up. You know, so sometimes somebody blows their lid, and I hate you, and you make me sick, and I wish I never worked here. And in a healthy body or healthy team, that would be okay.
Yeah.
I mean, now there's boundaries and rules. You know, it's not okay to hit each other. It's not. It's not okay to tear each other down. But that policing or that guiding is a function of a healthy team. You know, it's not just, quote, the leader. It becomes more and more in. So the next step up on Lencioni's thing is accountability.
Yeah, you're right. Is it commitment or accountability?
I'm sorry, commitment.
A commitment and then accountability.
Then accountability.
And then results.
So commitment follows the vulnerability trust.
Yeah.
And the conflict.
Yeah.
So if you don't have healthy conflict, then you're not going to have commitment. Because I'm not going to share anymore. I shared, and I had these ideas, and it's okay being shot down, meaning I disagree, but we need to honor each other in this thing.
Yeah.
So you say your idea, I may be thinking he's an idiot.
Right.
And that's okay I mean, what I'm thinking is just what I'm thinking. What you do with it, it matters. So I may be thinking you're an idiot, and so when you're talking, I can either shoot it down. One of the most common ways is through adverse body language. You know, so you're talking with this new idea, and you're over here rolling your eyes, or you're looking in your cell phone, or you're ignoring them. Well, that says to me, number one, I'm not going to share. I'm not going to be committed. Why would I risk me for this group of yo-hos, you know?
Right.
Well, because in a healthy thing, we know we're in it together. And so you're hurting or you're confusing or you may be dominating the thing. And a healthy team would say, Bob, hey, back down a little bit. And the team wouldn't be a herding thing where you herd.
Right.
It would be everybody accountability.
Yeah.
So it's not just the boss is here, everybody clean up your act. It's we're here and we're reacting. So coming back to the vulnerability trust, you know, how do you build that? And you build it for the most part consciously.
Intentionally, consciously, intentionally.
It's intentional.
Yeah, totally.
It doesn't happen just, and that's what I said before, a team is not just the number of people in a room. You know, to say, well, we got 8 people on the leadership team. Well, that sounds good. What do you mean by that? What is our? Does that mean that we're all leaders? Or what? You need to define it, and then need to act on it. So back to that pyramid, and then the question, the main question you were asking was, how about healthy conflict? And if you think without conflict, healthy conflict says I can do and say, and that's the vulnerability part. But then when I do and say, it may be not a good thing. And often it isn't at first, because we have to learn how to heal. We have to learn how to embrace, so to speak. So the last episode, I talked a little bit about the difference between an external processor and internal processor. That's where this really comes in. You know, an internal processor just feels like they're frightened in a sense to even say what they're thinking, partially because they haven't processed it. It's still, you know, and the tendency in a group, and again, there's a difference between a group and a team, but they're not opposite, but they're not necessarily synonymous either. But so a group might do things that a team would do, but it doesn't do it in a healthy way. Edwin Friedman, who we've talked about on A Failure of Nerve, talks about some of the characteristics of a chronically anxious organization, which you could almost put it next to Lencioni with the 5 dysfunctions. And so Friedman talks about the characteristics of a chronically anxious, and one of them is what he calls herding, like herding cattle, which means we don't deal with conflict individually. We go, well, I come to you and say, you know, a bunch of us were talking the other day. And we think that you're an idiot. That's herding. And herding is a symptom of dysfunction. And so parallel to herding is what he calls triangulation, emotional triangulation. And this is also a symptom of unhealthy conflict and so on. And that is, you and I have a problem with each other. It could be personality, it could be performance, whatever. An unhealthy kind of dysfunction, you and I don't deal with it. What we do is we go to a third party. So we have a triangulation. It's the water cooler. So and it feels right because I got to get this off my chest, so to speak. So I talk to somebody. My problem's with you. But I go to this person, and then I tell them, you know, do you think that, you know, Andrew is a jerk? Yeah, I do. And so triangulation then can grow into herding. So you see those two, those are symptoms. It'd be like going to the doctor and he says, does that hurt? No. Does this? Yeah, that hurts. So that's a symptom. That's not the cause. So there's an illustration from years ago, but it's real simple. And you go to the doctor and say, doctor, my arm hurts. You know, well, when does it hurt? When I go like that. And the doctor's prescription is, don't go like that. Well, that's how we tend to deal with conflict. Just avoid it.
Just don't do it.
You know, you two need to get along. Okay, true. So how are we going to get along? Well, I'm going to go talk to Susie, and Susie's really good at this, and so she'll talk to Betty. And no, time out. You have a problem with Andrew? Go talk to him. Well, I can't. I tried, and he didn't hear me. And, you know, there's a place for sort of a hierarchy of confrontation.
Yeah.
You know, but it's usually what we tend to do is avoid it.
Totally. Yeah.
And it's like our physical health.
Yeah.
You know, you see this thing that was relatively innocuous that didn't get dealt with, and you see it and hear it all the time. And it turns out you have stage 4 cancer. And had you dealt with it, 4 stages ago, we could have fixed it by just this.
Yeah, right.
And so that's operative all the time, that dynamic. So the conflict is something that you model, and it's not just verbal, explaining it. There's a phrase also when it comes to identifying the culture. It says if you want to find the culture of a group or a team, notice what is punished and what is rewarded.
Ooh, yeah, that's good.
So if you're punished for being honest and transparent, well, several things happen. Everybody's watching.
Yeah.
And they're thinking, whoa, I'm not going there. Bob just went there and he got his tail ripped
Yeah, right.
by the boss or by somebody. The dominant, it can happen. It doesn't just happen hierarchically. It can happen just relationally. Bob shares his idea and his struggle there. And Harry, who's just another team member, but is an external processor and has also got some major issues socially and so on. So he tears into the guy. Well, if you're you're an unhealthy team, everybody retreats.
Totally.
Yeah. Duck and cover.
It's a survival.
Yeah. A healthy team, and up the rung, it goes to the accountability that says we all are looking at. And he said, Bob, do you see what you just did there?
Yeah.
Susie just shared this, and you tore into her. See, and those are dynamics that are scary.
Very vulnerable.
Yeah, and so that's back to the vulnerability trust.
Totally.
A healthy team is, wow, if one of the things that I do in coaching teams and organizations, if I find out a ton about, if I had only one thing I would do, which I don't, I have many things, but it would just sit in on a staff meeting.
Yeah. You learn so much.
And you see the dynamic of all of these things.
Totally.
So when I'm a consultant, and I'm sort of trained and experienced in that, it's one thing for me to be able to point it out and help and so on. But ultimately, you don't want to be dependent on a consultant. You want to own it. One of the things I've appreciated about working with ProEdge is the malleability of the teams and the desire to grow.
Yeah.
We've been through our sort of exercises on speed of trust. But and I kind of brag on ProEdge at times with other clients.
Yeah.
But and the thing that you guys have had, it's been led, by your CEO or your president, and they model it.
Totally.
And they model it both in practice and in theory. You could model it in practice, but no one knows
totally
what's going on.
Yeah.
So again, circling back and reiterating around conflict. Conflict is natural, and it's a part of growth. And another book or another concept that I talk about, that you've heard me talk about it, but is called necessary endings. And the basic idea is nothing new happens until something ends. So you've got this dynamic within a team that is not healthy.
Totally, yeah.
And so how do you get it healthy? Well, usually it begins by stop doing some things. That doesn't fix it by itself, but it's like you need to let the swelling go down. If you have
Yeah.
a sprained ankle,
Yeah.
you don't instantly, or it might be broken. I mean, I remember playing basketball and I came down and rolled my ankle really bad, and it tore all the ligaments in my ankle, and it was horrible. And it swelled up the size of, like almost like not a basketball, but, like that. And the first thing they do is they put ice on it. Why do they do that? To cause the swelling to go down. The swelling is the body's natural instinct to protect it. It swells up. It's like a cast. And it keeps it from doing further damage. Well, in a team, in the same thing, you can have injuries. You can have, and they can be overt injuries where you say something or do something, and everybody sees it, and the swelling starts, and so you back off and you go, whoa.
Yeah.
A healthy team would say, okay, let's just give this some time, give it some space. An unhealthy would make it even worse. It'd be like
they just
you're lying on the
perpetuate
ground.
it.
Yeah. Get up, come on, you suck it up.
Yeah.
Well, and it gets worse. And then you get so that you just ignore it. And the guy's walking around like Quasimodo, going, why does that guy walk like that?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't notice. Well, it turns out his ankle is totally destroyed.
Yeah.
And you could come in and from an outside, and I'd look and say, there's something going on here. And so my role often would be to identify it and then help the leaders or the team identify, but then act on it. But how do we act on it? That's why I say it's not just the concepts, it's the modeling. And so now, and I know in your stream, so to speak, that's been modeled, and because it's modeled, it's hard, and it's confusing, and you don't always do it well. So that's where commitment comes in.
Yeah.
When you have that vulnerability trust, and when you have healthy conflict, then now you're willing to be fully engaged. That's where the commitment comes in. If I don't have those others, I'm not going to be committed.
Right.
I'm going to do whatever it works for me, including be in a kiss up. And it's a political thing. I don't know about this or that, but I know that I can't talk to my boss about this but whatever. Instead of being able, in a healthy thing, I can go to him and we can talk about it. And there's always, in a team, also there's layers and there's different kinds of teams, meaning for different purposes. Sometimes a team might just be two people, and it's very streamlined, and it's very clear. You need to get from point A to point B in an hour, and so you need to figure out how to do that. I don't know if you've ever seen these exercises they've done on trust and teams, and they're like in the Marines and stuff, where you have this obstacle like a big, huge wall.
Oh, yeah.
That's like 20 feet tall.
Yeah.
And you got 5 people.
Yeah.
And the goal is to get all of them up over it. So you have to work as a team.
Yeah.
Okay, that would be a very specific kind of a team that is functioning around a purpose, a very specific thing that you can measure.
Yeah.
So when you go to the workplace, see, all of these things are operative. So if you look at the Marine thing, going up, they come up with amazing ways to lean on somebody, then they push something.
Yeah.
So everybody has a part in it. And it's by design. It's not just the 2 strongest guys just throw everybody over.
Right, yeah.
And if they could, that might be fine. But usually these obstacles are created where there's no way you can do this unless everybody
Yeah, it's operating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, there's another analogy there, and I don't know if you've ever done this. I forget what it's called, but it's you go into a room with like 5 people,
Yeah.
and you solve the problem. You solve the
Is that
mystery.
like an escape room kind of
Escape
thing?
room,
Yeah, and
yeah,
everyone has
that's
to
it.
work together
Yeah. Have you ever
for the
done that?
clues. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah.
And that's a picture of a team, where you've got people using their individual gifts.
Yeah.
Ideally, so if you got the brainiac tech guy, he's over there figuring this piece of it.
Right.
Then you got this guy, but you don't even know sometimes what those gifts are.
Yeah.
If you've been together, if you did the escape room 10 times with the same team, you'd have a really different outcome.
Yeah, you get real good at it.
Because typically, at least as far as I've experienced, it's you do it once, and you're for the first time. You may know each other, and often you do. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in that. But you kind of think, Bob's really good at that. Harry's good at this.
Yeah.
But everybody needs to own their own piece, and it has to. That's a good picture. You have to trust. Our whole deal is built on whether techie can get his techie stuff done in 3 minutes, and if he doesn't, the place blows up. So again, not losing sight of the original thing of conflict. All of these are pieces.
Yeah.
And it's like the body, the human body. There's a lot of different variables going on. The human body is a system of systems. And they all have to work together. If you just have an infection in your finger, it could ultimately cause you to have your foot amputated.
Sure. Yeah.
Why? Because it goes through there. And
yeah, it's all connected.
So let me stop there and
Yeah.
let's process a little
Yeah.
bit.
I mean, I think it's a lot of things that I'm picking up on. I love that the idea of healing. I don't think I don't usually think about that. When I think about conflict, I think about just engaging in conflict. I don't even think about the post processing of that experience and the team's ability to come back together, which is vulnerable and can be difficult to do. So that's like the healing part of like, is a team capable of coming back after conflict and healing from it, which I think is so fascinating. I think that we talked about the negative ways, hurting and triangulation. I think for me, both of those are, they're based on like a lack of trust and vulnerability. It's vulnerable to confront somebody else. And so it's easier if I feel like I have support from my other peers and colleagues to go and get that one person to shape up. And so
kind of an ambush.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting isn't it in Matthew where they outline a kind of a hierarchy of, and it starts with the individual, and if the individual is resistant to that type of interaction, then you bring in somebody else to come alongside you, but it starts with just you approaching the person that you have an issue with.
Yeah, and that's the part that usually, that's hierarchical, because if you don't do that, the first effort is hurting.
Yes.
Then it negates it makes it very much more difficult to, number one, get to the root of it, because it instantly is defensive. I don't
Totally.
You got 3 guys sitting there with guns, and you're not thinking about what great guys they are. You're just thinking, I'm going to defend myself.
Yep, absolutely.
And so all of the energy doesn't go towards healing or even exposing, getting to where, look at that.
Yeah.
So you don't do the diagnostic because it's too painful.
Yeah.
Or you're not even sure how to do it. That's when you go to a doctor. The doctor should know how to do that stuff.
Right.
If you go in the doctor and you say, is this and this, he goes, I don't know what to do there. Well, and which may be the case, and that's okay if you're transparent. Say, you know what? I don't think I've seen that before. Let's go to get a second opinion. But the spirit of it is you're not castigating the person that's the issue.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so even the Matthew thing, it's a healing perspective. How do we bring healing to this situation? Not how do we get rid of Bozo.
Yeah, right. Well, and I think what's so core to healing is a word that you mentioned that is often dropped from business entirely, which is love.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if my approach to call somebody out is just malintent, or it's to get rid of them, or it's to push them off a project or get them demoted, whatever it is, right? I don't like working with this person.
Yeah.
This person's tough, so I want to get them off. It's not done in the act of love. I think when it is done in the act of love and in the best interest of, like, I care for this person, even though they might be hard to work with, like, I want to give them an opportunity to be a great team member, and I want to be a great team member. And so it's operating out of love that creates the opportunity to heal, because it creates an environment where it's like I don't have to tense up and like get ready to defend myself because someone's calling me out. It's like, oh, they genuinely care about me. I know they care about me, so I'm going to be more receptive to what they're saying, and I want to grow and re-engage in this. I think that's even that type of love can also be aligned and attributed, like the mission of an organization. I think is in some part how we choose to love, and it's like in the meetings where nobody wants to say anything because there's a lack of trust. It's like I feel like the flip side of that is a team that's coming together that has vulnerability and trust, but they all love. And their love is aligned. So then they're passionately debating on how that expression should be towards the customer, or to the product, or whatever. But I want to come back to this a little bit. I think we started talking about some ways to do it, but like, how does a team get to that point of being able to actually start doing that? And one of the things you said, which I think is huge, and I have seen this from my boss, which was, it started from the top, and it was led by example. Led by example. It wasn't just like, hey, everybody, you guys got to go do this thing. Good luck. Yeah. You know, it was, I'm gonna do this as the leader. I'm leaning into that. I do think that helps the team start to shape and mold. But what are some other things that you've seen be really helpful in shaping a team towards being able to do that well?
Well, again, there's a bit of a hierarchy or sort of a system. If you do this, it affects this, which affects this, and so it's not just linear. If you have a problem, linear, and the problem, the cause and effect are very closely related. So you just go, we're not vulnerable. So how do you do that? We do this. Right. And actually, it might be you want to be vulnerable, and you do this first, which then opens this, and then allows this, which then comes back here. Yeah. And so it's always a tension between the big picture and the little picture, and we tend to err on losing the big picture. So the big picture in this context is love. And whether you're a believer in Christ or if you're not, these are still true. Yeah. In 1 Corinthians 13, which most people are familiar with it, if nothing else, from wedding vows. Yeah, right. You know, but it talks about, it's really powerful, and it's clear that if you don't have that, you don't have anything. You know, so what is it that you have? And he delineates. Yeah. Love is kind. Love does not keep track of other people's failures. Love does not rejoice in someone's failures. Love is perseveres. Love is patient. You know, so if you look at those things, those are conceptual, and they're huge, and they're very important. Yeah. But they have no value if it's not modeled. In fact, it reverses, because now it's just a hypocrite. Yeah. You know, the boss talks about love and blah, 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 but then he treats everybody like dirt. Yeah. You know, and One of the concepts that around similar to that you had mentioned before, a mission. So in a sense, what is our mission? And a mission is basically kind of formulating where we're going and why we're going there, and et cetera. But I delineate between having a mission, which many companies and organizations do, and they've got it on the wall, and they've got all that, which is good, but it's concept.
Yep.
It's the difference between having a mission and being on a mission.
Yeah, this is so good.
And if you're on a mission, it's pretty clear to people. In the illustration I've used back when I was pastor and preaching, one of the kind of dreaded things that can happen, you're up front and you have to go to the bathroom. And you're 10 minutes into a half-hour sermon.
You're like, oh boy.
And so in normal life, you could probably just go, I need to get up and go. But and I many times had this, but in specific, it was early on, and I'm just thinking, now I've got this dual thing going on. My brain is thinking, you got to take care of this.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, whatever I'm saying in the sermon, I couldn't have told you anything. All I could think of, as soon as the time ran out and I kind of made it, after dancing and kind of going everything I could think of to
hold it down,
the waters. And I had the habit of shaking hands with people at the end of the service just because I like to, and et cetera. So when the benediction is done, I basically, and everyone's still kind of focused on that. I run basically out of there. But the problem is across the bathroom is across the lobby.
Yeah.
And there's all these people there, and they all want to say something to me.
Yeah.
Hey, I loved your sermon, or you suck, or whatever. And so as I move, I have to get from here to there in order to accomplish my mission.
Yeah, yeah.
And when people would grab me, hey, could I? And what I would do is I would say, I'm on a mission. So can you just hold on?
Yeah.
And everybody knew exactly what I meant. And the difference, it wasn't just saying, hey, I have a mission. In fact, here's a card. It'll explain it and all that stuff.
Yeah, right.
No, I mean, it was. So you think about as a team, as a company, as a fellowship, as a church, or whatever the team is, the question, it's a good one, I think, to ask in terms of your own diagnostic. Are we, and they're not mutually exclusive. Ideally, they're inclusive, meaning you have the concept, and you also are living it. And when you're on a mission, pretty much everybody knows it. You don't have to publicize it.
Yeah, it's clear.
It's clear. And how does that happen? It's congruence from the top to the bottom. So in my work as working with teams, working with companies, as a consultant, the thing that I say is that we lead from the top down. We measure from the bottom up.
Yeah.
The body is not just measured by what the CEO or the senior pastor or whoever does. It's not only that. You can have that one really clicking, and that affects the whole, but and it should start from there. It's just like in the body again, healing. The brain is the healing mechanism in your whole body. And it works through the nervous system, because all of the messages, the brain is the CEO, and it sends a message to the body through the spine, through and then out through all of the nerves.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's up here, and it can cause you to not be able to feel your foot.
Mm-hmm.
The message gets
Yeah.
So at the top, it's important that the leader be leading in this,
Yeah.
but he can be leading or she can be leading, but it doesn't, because it's in the chiropractic world, it's called subluxating, where
Well,
the vertebra get sideways and it pinches the
interesting.
nerve.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so in chiropractic, the idea is to straighten or to get that back in line. So if it's out of alignment, then it cuts off the messages, and so then you don't have health
Interesting. Yeah.
in the body. So it starts here, but it still comes back to the modeling, and we shouldn't have to spend a lot of time convincing people about our mission if we're on it. People, they may not understand it, but they know this guy is focused.
Yeah.
And that's uncomfortable because it's easier to just have a mission. And and you talk
Feels
about
good.
the mission.
Yeah.
And you get handouts and you get all this, but then someone comes in and says, so your mission is to do this, right? Yeah, that's exactly it. I don't see anybody doing that. So what's that about? Well, here's our mission. Look at this. Here's 4 points. And, yeah. So, but no one's doing that. So that kind of ties into that.
Well, and even if I could use that
Yeah,
analogy
do.
of running on a mission, right?
Yes.
And that was the code. You're passing up a lot of good opportunity. There's all these people that want to talk and shake
Right.
hands, and
Yep.
and it's like, but you're on a mission.
Yep.
And I think it's uncomfortable for people to be on a mission
Yep.
because it means you pass up good stuff
Yep.
for what you're really
Yep.
trying to accomplish.
That's a good insight.
And I think sometimes, for me, if I don't clearly know what it looks like to be on mission, it is hard for me to engage in healthy conflict on what that looks like,
Great.
because
point.
maybe the good is the great. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're not doing it. So how do I know shaking hands isn't the right thing to be doing rather than
Yeah.
run into the restaurant? Like,
Yeah.
how do I know the difference? I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I think, even as I'm processing healthy conflict and helping a team engage with that, they have to know what the mission is, and they have to know what it looks like to be on mission, so that we can engage in healthy conflict and fight for passionately what is great versus what is good. Because there's a lot of good out there. Any healthy growing business has a lot of good.
Yeah.
That they can choose. Tons of opportunity. I forget what the saying is, right? It's companies don't usually companies don't starve. What's the alternative to that? It's like, it's not a lack of opportunity, it's too much opportunity and not knowing what to do with. They drown. Companies don't starve, they drown.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is indicative of like, I have my own insecurities because I don't know what it looks like to be on mission. I'm coming into a meeting where I need to make a decision on that's going to ultimately shape what it looks like to pursue the mission. And so it's like all of this inside, like if super
Anxiety,
vulnerable,
yeah.
anxiety. And it's like, I don't know what this looks like. And so I feel like as a leader, being really clear on not just having it on the wall, but then living it for my team to see, so that they're coming in being like, oh, I know where we're going.
Yeah.
So now I can have a conversation on what I think is best to head in that direction.
Yeah.
Which is really, really cool. And that's kind of where I would love for us to kind of wrap our conversation as the leader. I think there are, like my boss is I would say more naturally prone to engage in conflict. Not super hard for him to do that.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of leaders who are more nurturers or craftsmen, or they would have a harder time engaging in that type of discussion. It's more uncomfortable for them, but it can be done. So what some things from your experience and expertise, how have you been able to kind of coach really great leaders that have a hard time engaging with conflict? Because it's uncomfortable. It's not natural for them at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And often you find if somebody, it's natural for conflict to be difficult. It's built into what conflict is.
Yeah.
So if it's too easy for you, then it's probably, that's another issue. And you have people, he's great at conflict, creating it, but resolving it or directing it are different things than just just doing it.
Yeah, it's good.
So it falls back into the category of modeling. So, and what are you modeling? You're modeling when transparency. So transparency just means you can see through it. It means that you can see. I let people see what's going on inside of me.
Yeah.
And that takes courage.
Yeah.
It takes focus. It takes being on a mission. If I'm the leader and I know that these things we're trying to build, like 1 Corinthians 13 or Matthew, etc., then my behavior is fueled by being on that mission.
Totally.
So I look at there's an obstacle here. And one of them may be that I tend to have an easy trigger. It doesn't take much to set me off.
Yeah.
And so it affects the whole team.
Totally.
So everybody's afraid.
Yep.
And that can happen on all levels. As the leader of it, you need to model. So say you got 5 people in this group. You're trying to decide on whether to buy a new building or not. And all 5, and this is I alluded to the last episode. We didn't really get into it. Maybe we won't now, but just the nature of a good meeting.
Yeah, that's coming.
Yeah, but so as the leader, you're modeling, but that also means that you're aware of the big picture, which involves these values. The values are the things that determine how we treat each other, and how do we work together. What are the watermarks that we're doing it well? And those have to do with the modeling. So I think of an example. For me, I have a whole truckload of weaknesses that most people that know me would be able to point to that truck. But I also, by God's grace, and mostly by God's grace, but having people in my life that pushed me and showed me how to deal with conflict because I tend to be more volatile and expressive, which, if I'm an external processor, that looks like now we're really getting to it, and it can be. Yeah. But meanwhile, over in the corner are these 3 people that are internal processors, and they're thinking, I'm not going in that pool. That thing's got sharks in it.
Totally. Yeah.
And so they don't say anything. And the assumption is they don't have anything to say, which is rarely the case. It's just how do they process it? So you have that going on in terms of modeling even. So go ahead.
Just real quick, how do you, because most things are time sensitive, and so you can't necessarily give an internal processor just endless time to, how do you in a meeting give them space, but also call them up into engaging in that conversation? Because I think you're right. It's like meetings can easily be dominated by external processors. Yeah. How do you bring in the internal processors?
Well, I think there's some very practical things, and one of them is anticipating it. So if you're the leader and you're the one that basically has put together the structure of this meeting, and not all meetings are the same. If you're trying to decide whether to go to Wendy's or, In-N-Out Burgers, then you're in a line with 50 people behind you.
Yeah.
If you're an internal processor or external, it doesn't matter. We got to know right now. So you can't think, well, let's take an hour for Susie to figure out if we want to go for a hamburger or chicken.
Yeah.
So not all meetings are the same. So, but that is a subtext that you need to know why you're meeting. And so we'll bridge just into that for a second. What's the purpose of the group? What's the task? What's the mission that we're on for just this? Okay, and what are the characteristics of it? Well, we have an hour, and we have 3 things that we need to talk about, and then and you're constructing the meeting before you ever get there, and that's one of the meetings are horrible in general, and people hate them. They dread them.
Yeah.
And it should be the highlight of.
Yeah, it should be exciting.
Because it's focused. Everybody knows what we're trying to do, and you see it when you're in the habit of like having a weekly meeting. It needs to be examined and to say, do we really need that? And part of that is, what are we trying to do?
Yeah.
If we're trying to construct a bridge, we're going to need longer meetings, but not just long. We need purposeful. We need to know how we're going to bridge this part, and that is led by the leader. It's constructed. Now, it could be that that's collaborative, even the construction, but it basically reflects what you have in mind. So if I don't have any idea what we're trying to do in the meeting, guess what? It's going to be just a free-for-all.
Totally. Yeah.
So, and another piece of the meeting, and this will tie back, is everybody should know what the purpose of the meeting is, and everybody should know what the reason they're in it. So a lot of times, a meeting can be used as almost like a reward in a bigger organization. The CEO or whoever's the person comes out, I'd like to have you be in this meeting.
Yeah, you're like, oh, wow.
And you're going, wow, you mean the meeting? Yeah. So you're not sure why you're there, but you know that you've been invited. Okay, so that tells you something. But even at that, you ought to know, ideally, you'd say, I want you to be in this meeting because you have a good ability to discern this, and we're trying as a team to discern that. So I need you to be in it for this meeting.
Yeah.
The tricky stuff, it can be saying, okay, now you're a part of the senior leadership team. So now there's 5 of us. And so it's a permanent thing, but it doesn't mean necessarily that you know why you're in it.
Yeah, right.
All I know is I'm thinking it's a reward for being a good guy, and it may be. And often that's kind of it. But the leader should know. And so if you look at sports again, if you look at a football team, which is probably the most team-oriented sport there is.
Yep.
Because every single piece has got to be, it's this. You got to know why you're there. What is I was a center in football. And so every down, on offense, I touched the ball.
Yeah.
And I had to collaborate with the quarterback to know, but I knew basically my job was to hike the ball into the hands of the quarterback.
Yep.
But then one of the things about being a center is, and this in those days they didn't have the rule where you couldn't hit the center. They have that now. But for me, it was I'm down I've got to snap the ball and look up.
Yeah.
Because there's 2 guys coming at me. So I needed to know why I was there. I'm a part of the team, but they're not everybody has the same role.
Right.
And you can't, you have 11 guys. So you can't have 12. You can't have 13. You can't have 5. So everything's got a purpose, and you practice them. So put that into this meeting. So in a sense, a huddle in football is a meeting. And it varies. So like some teams will do a hurry up offense, and they don't have a huddle. What they have is a code. So and they have it's all formed. So they have 30 seconds before it's go time.
Yeah.
And so some people will use that in a huddle, and that's their strategy. Others, it's you don't have a huddle, but you still have information. The quarterback's calling out this and this, and he's adjusting. But each piece on the team, so he says it through the code, tight end come across the middle at 5 yards out. So and that's like Ruby 8. And you're going, oh, Ruby 8. Oh, that means I come across here. But I have to remember that coming across here, over here, Ruby 7 is also coming across here. But I'm coming across at 5 yards.
Yeah.
And he's coming across at 7 yards.
Yeah.
And if we don't get that right, it doesn't work.
Right.
Okay, so take that idea into a team, in a company or an organization. People need to know what their role is. How long does it last? Is this a permanent thing? Do I snap the ball for both sides? Do I, am I, in those days, it was also a long snapper. He did everything.
Yeah.
As a center. So, that's just my job.
Yeah.
So I need to, number one, understand it. So you can have everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to do. And you can even have them technically executing, but not have a team. You don't have that sense of camaraderie. You don't have that sense of we're all in this together. One of the things we talked about earlier about love, that how people are hesitant to use that in the workplace. If you say, I just love my people. I love the people I work with. In fact, it's easier to say that on a broad scale when it's not have a face, but to say, I love you. Now, again, gets funky because we're so worried about whatever. But the reality is, so like you see again in sports, you'll hear a team that's really, that they just won the Super Bowl or some big thing. One of the most common things they say, that people ask them, what's the key to the way you guys perform? And one of the most common things they say is, we love each other. I've got his back, he's got my back. And loving each other is very clear what that means. It means like covering for each other.
Yeah.
They use this term. I'm playing for the guy next to me.
Yeah.
What is that about? Does that mean I do his job? No, it means that I'm doing all I can do for the team. Deion Sanders uses a lot of these analogies, but one of them that I love is he says that, the cliche about a team is there's no I in team, which, you kind of go, yeah, what does that mean? And basically what you tend to think is that no one has an ego, no one has, it's all out there. And then he follows that with, he says, but there is an I in win. So our job on a team is to be the best we can do. Yeah. And it starts with me. Yeah. And if I'm the best I can be, it's going to serve the rest of the team. It's not just, I don't spend any time working on my stuff because I'm just going around helping all these guys. First work on yourself, and it's the thing on the airlines, on the airplane, where they say, if you need the oxygen, and it drops down,
yeah.
you put it
Yep.
on you
Yep.
first.
Yep.
Because if you don't, the baby, you may he not be, living at that point.
Yeah.
Same thing. So put the mask on you first. If you're on a team, so when you come into thing, it's your responsibility. If you don't know why you're there, don't say, well, this CEO is a jerk and he doesn't know. Find out. And so it's everybody kind of doing their part.
Yeah.
But they're on a mission.
Yeah. It's
We
great.
know what we're doing. And another analogy about the mission, let's use going to Disneyland as the metaphor. And so I declare to my family, we're going to Disneyland. Well, you have mission and you have vision. Well, the vision is, they don't know what Disneyland is. They've never heard it, never seen it. They haven't grown up with Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck.
Right.
They're going, is it a mouse? What is that? So you show them pictures, and maybe you have a video of Disneyland, and you give them a vision of it. And now the kids are going, we're going to Disneyland. Have you ever been there? No. Do you know what it is? Not exactly, but I think they have like mice and ducks. But it looks like they're having fun.
Looks great,
okay?
yeah.
So, and you spend the time, painting that picture for them. So then we say, okay, now how are we going to get there? What's our strategy? Well, we're gonna fly, or we're gonna walk, or we're gonna ride bikes. We're gonna rent a car, and we're gonna drive. So why do we rent a car as opposed to? Well, it'll be better for us as a family, because we'll interact and we'll stop along the way and we'll see stuff. So our mission and our vision start blending.
Yeah.
And and then the third piece is our core values. And the core values are the description of how we're going to treat each other on the trip. So we'll stop the car right here if you guys don't quit fighting. My dad used to say, I'm going to turn the car around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or we grew up with him spanking us with his belt. So all he'd have to do is reach down and grab his belt and we go.
Yeah, whoa.
And so what's the value? We don't hurt each other. We don't say things to each other that are hurtful. We don't hit each other. So whatever those values are, so those will stop the car. We'll say, if you're not doing that, then we're not going any further. The mission, you could still be on the mission and not having your values determine what you're doing.
Right.
So you come onto a team and they have these great, we're going to change the world. We're going to give, everybody in Africa, something. And you go, that's great. But then you turn around and this guy treats the other one horribly. And it's confusing. And you're saying, what is that? Well, that modeling is a part of the mission, but it's defined by the values, the core values, and then there's two different kinds of values. One is core values, which don't change. We're going to do this all day, every day. Everything we do is going to be through that filter. But then there's operational values that do change. So, for example, if you're a new company, an entrepreneurial setting, your values around cash management are the number one thing. Because, and why? Because if you don't have cash, you won't be around.
Yep.
Totally. So now everything has to be determined. It goes through this thing of saying, well, should we buy this? Should we do this? I don't think we should, because we can't afford it right now. What we need is to come up with this amount of capital.
Yeah.
So that's another sort of layer around values. So here you on your trip to Disneyland, you've got value. We know that this car gets X amount of miles per gallon, and the next gas station is beyond that. So we make a decision. It's strategic. You don't really, you're not thinking about, am I loving and am I, you're just thinking, we're not going to make it to the next gas station. So now our values are, we're going to have to turn around, and we can't be complaining about how far it is to McDonald's.
Yeah.
We've got to, our values just changed. We still treat each other nicely. But now our strategic values are, we've got to get gas. So a bunch of different analogies.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I want to, just in summary, I think even core values create clarity around the mission and create clarity around how to engage in healthy conflict. We've had fierce conversation because one decision felt more financially beneficial but teetered on a core value, whereas another one wasn't aligned with the core value but would potentially hurt us financially. Both of those are worth discussing.
Yep.
And the core values created a platform for us to really engage in that conversation really powerfully. So to the journey and understanding how you get from here to here, there's the mission, there's the vision, and there's the core values that all help align a team in it being able to engage in healthy conflict. But I think how I want to end our time together is something that you've just repeatedly said, just over and over and over in different ways, is it takes intentionality. It's like if I just say it and expect it's going to happen, it's never going to happen. If I just go into a meeting and expect we're going to engage in healthy conflict, we'll never engage in healthy conflict. If even myself, if I just hope that I'm going to be one day able to engage in healthy conflict, it's like it'll never, there has to be bandwidth and margin for me to, as a leader, spend time intentionally understanding how to make that a reality. Because it'll never happen organically, because it is against human nature to want to engage with that well. And so it's like I'm processing just in my own ways of like, how can I step back so that I can really intentionally come back into that situation well and lead well, just so that it's not happening by accident. Because the moment it happens by accident, my nature comes into it and I don't do it well, and the team suffers for that, and I want to be more intentional. And so I think that's the challenge for me in my own leadership, is just it has to be done intentionally. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, I mean, you hit on it. I mean, it's taking responsibility for your part.
Yes.
Not for the whole.
Yeah.
I mean, your part affects the whole. But, so that's the accountability as you grow together. The accountability, which is that next kind of the final rung between actually the top, which in Lencioni's, that's the object, is to do this.
Yeah.
Why do we exist? What are we trying to do? So it's like the human body. It's a system of systems. So you can have this system working and not and neglect this system. So we may really be clear on strategy, and we got flow charts and we got spreadsheets and but Susie and Bob over here are dying. And so there's a time where you say, you know what? And this is a piece, and I'll just throw this in without expanding too much, but in terms of values and core values, they need to be force ranked. And this is what teams don't do.
Yeah, this is good.
Because they're not all the same. Even within the core values. And an example, using Disneyland, just as hypothetical, but they have force ranked their values. And I know this because I've studied it. And so here's the Pirates of the Caribbean, if you've been there, or whatever the ride is, and you've been waiting in line for 2 hours, and it's hot and sticky, and you're just thinking, I want out of here, and you're an executive, and you're used to getting your way, and now by the time you get up to the thing, and your kids are screaming, and the little girl in the little outfit that's saying, next one to get into the thing. You're just getting ready to get in, and she gets a message on her earphone that there's a tornado watch and that everybody needs to take cover. So she has to make this decision with this big old burly guy that is used to getting his way and say, you can't get on that right now. You need to, in fact, he's halfway in. You need to get out.
Yeah.
He said, no way. I've been waiting. Okay. So how do you make that decision? Well, the force rank, their top core value, which is surprising, it was to me when I first saw it, now I understand it, is safety first. And secondly is customer satisfaction.
Yeah.
It would be easy to say, if that isn't clear, it's just one of the core values.
Yeah.
And when do you know when to use one and not use the other? You know, so when you've got that behind you, you've got that spine
it's
that's
so
there.
good.
Here's this little girl standing up to this big guy saying, sir, you've got to leave. And the force rank kicks in as if like Nordstrom is famous for customer satisfaction.
Yes, they are.
Where you put the customer first. Well, that isn't totally true. If you look at Nordstrom a little closer, it actually is, it's true, but not over the employee. So it's not
interesting.
okay for you to mistreat.
Yeah.
And Southwest Airlines was famous for this. And there's an example in one of the books about them. But somebody wrote into the CEO saying the pilot or the flight attendant was making jokes. And I don't know if you've ever ridden on Southwest.
Yeah.
They
have fun. They used to be really fun with their
fun.
Yeah.
And so they were complaining, and basically this guy was a big time guy that was complaining and went to the CEO, and his response was, thank you for bringing that to my attention, you know, the CEO to this guy. I hope you enjoy flying on another airline because that's who we are.
Yeah.
So the employee, you have internal values, and then you have external values, market values.
Yeah.
You know, so, and it's huge because if you're working for a thing that we love each other, you know, our people come first, and you're thinking, BS, you don't care about anybody.
Yeah.
You just like that sound,
Yeah.
and you've done all the work, but you don't practice it.
Yeah.
Jesus gives the parable of a guy that built his house on the sand, and then he said it's great until the storm comes, and then it all goes to. Well, that's a picture of values. If you build your house on values that go all the way down, they go deep.
Yeah.
They're force ranked because if you don't have those right, maybe temporarily you'll be okay, but in the long run, it's going to collapse.
Yeah.
You know, so when we're building our team, it's like building a house. You know, you want to make sure you don't get the blueprints and just guess. You go, it's good to have the blueprints here. Has anybody looked at them?
Yeah, right.
Well, no, but I got them. I mean, or we spread them out, but so it's all a part of it's constructing.
So good. Yeah, I love that. And I love that lasting image of, core values help build foundation that allow longevity for the team to function well. And that's so huge. So I appreciate the conversation.
Well,